She ripped the name tag off his chest and dropped it into a glass of ice water. There, Vanessa Kane said loud enough for every table to hear. "Now you're exactly what you've always been. Nobody." Ethan Carter didn't flinch. 60 seconds earlier, he'd knelt on that same marble floor and pulled a dying man back from the other side. 60 seconds later, he was on the sidewalk with no job and $11 in his pocket. What Vanessa Kane didn't know, what nobody in that room knew, was that a Navy helicopter was already in the air, and the pilot had one name on his flight order: Ethan Carter. Before we go on, comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far this story has traveled. And if you believe a man's worth isn't printed on his paycheck, subscribe. You'll want to be here for what happens next. The alarm went off at 4:40 in the morning, and Ethan Carter caught it before the second beep. He'd trained himself years ago to wake without sound. Some habits you keep because they're useful. Some you keep because you can't put them down. He sat on the edge of the bed for exactly 4 seconds. That was all he allowed himself. Then he stood. Down the hall, a small voice said, "Dad? Go back to sleep, Bug. You're leaving already. I'm making your lunch first. I can make my own lunch. You're 8. I'm 8.5. Ethan almost smiled. Then you can make your own lunch when you're 9. Lily Carter appeared in the kitchen doorway anyway, dragging a blanket, her hair sticking up on one side, the port under her collarbone, hidden under her pajama shirt, but never hidden from him. Never for 1 second. "You took your pill?" he asked. "Last night?" "Both of them, Dad." "Both of them, Lily?" "Yes." She climbed onto the counter stool. "You always ask twice." "That's because you always answer once." She watched him butter bread. He did it fast, efficient, the way a man does something he's done 900 times. Cut the crusts. 2 apple slices. The little note he wrote every single morning on a torn corner of paper, no matter how tired he was. "What's it say today?" she asked. "You'll read it at lunch." "Read it to me now." "That defeats the whole system." "There's no system. It's paper." He looked at her. 8.5 years old, 49 pounds, and she argued like a public defender. "It says," he told her, "the bravest thing anybody does is show up." Lily made a face. "That's not brave. Everybody shows up." Ethan zipped her lunch bag closed. "No, baby," he said. "They really don't." The bus to Grand Harbor took 51 minutes when it ran on time, which was never. Ethan stood the whole way with his uniform in a garment bag over his shoulder, because sitting wrinkled the shirt, and a wrinkled shirt got you written up. He'd learned that in week 1. Mrs. Delgado from 3B got on at Waterside. She was 78 and worked mornings at a hospital cafeteria. "You look tired, mijo." "I'm fine." "That's what tired men say." "Then I guess I'm fine." She patted his arm. "How's the little one?" Ethan's jaw moved. "Numbers were down last week. They're watching it." "And the medicine?" "We're managing." Mrs. Delgado looked at him for a long moment. The kind of look old women give you when they've already done the math you're pretending not to have done. "Ethan," she said, "you know they have programs for the... We're managing Mrs. D." She let it go. People usually did. Ethan had a way of closing a door without ever raising his voice. He got off at Church Street and walked the last 11 blocks because the transfer cost $2.75 and $2.75 twice a day. 5 days a week was $55 a month, and $55 a month was a copay. Everything was a copay now. That's how his brain worked these days. He didn't see money anymore. He saw doses. Grand Harbor sat on the water in Norfolk, Virginia, with a valet stand out front and a wine list that ran 40 pages. A dinner for 2 there cost more than Ethan's rent. He came in through the service entrance at 6:15 like always. "Carter." Marcus, the floor manager, didn't look up from his clipboard. "You're on 11 through 19. That's the whole east side. Congratulations. Marcus, that's a two-man section. Then you'd better move fast. Now Marcus looked up, and there was something almost pleasant in it, which was worse. Or you could go work somewhere that doesn't require moving fast. Applebee's is hiring. Behind him, two of the younger servers laughed. Ethan didn't. Copy that, he said, and went to tie his apron. That was the thing about Ethan Carter that drove them all a little crazy, though none of them could have told you why. You could hand him garbage, and he'd take it like you'd handed him a task. No argument, no sulking. He'd just say, copy that, and go do it, and somehow that made them want to push harder. Because a man who doesn't break makes you wonder what he's made of. And nobody at Grand Harbor wanted to wonder about Ethan Carter. At 7:40, Table 14 sent back a steak. It's overcooked, the man said. He was maybe 50 cufflinks a watch, worth more than a used car. I'll have it refired right away, sir. I said medium rare. Do you know what medium rare means? I do, sir. Do you? Because I'm looking at gray. Ethan looked at the plate. It was a perfect medium rare. The center was pink as a sunrise. He'd carried it out of the kitchen himself 4 minutes ago. I'll have it refired right away, sir, he said again. Unbelievable. The man turned to his wife. This is why you can't get good help. Nobody listens. Nobody cares. His wife stared at her water glass. Ethan took the plate. In the kitchen, the line cook glanced at it and said, That's a perfect med rare. I know. So why? Because he's had 4 drinks and his wife hasn't looked at him all night. Ethan said, Fire another one. The cook blinked. How the hell do you know that? Ethan was already walking away. He'd spent 6 years reading rooms where reading the room wrong meant somebody didn't come home. A man at a steakhouse who couldn't get his wife's attention was the easiest read of his life. At 8:20, Table 17 snapped his fingers. Actually snapped them, twice. Like calling a dog. Ethan came over. Yes, sir? More bread. Right away. And when I say more bread, I mean before the basket's empty. That's the job. That's literally the entire job. The man laughed at his own joke, and the 3 men with him laughed too, and one of them said, Take it easy on him, Rob. He's doing his best. In a voice that made it clear he did not believe that at all. Yes, sir, Ethan said. He brought the bread. He said thank you. He always said thank you, because at 11:15 that night when the last table finally left, and he counted his tips on the bus, every dollar in that stack was a milligram, and every milligram was an hour, and every hour was Lily. You can eat almost anything when someone's waiting up for you. At 9:05, she arrived. You always knew when Vanessa Kane walked into Grand Harbor because the room changed temperature. 39 years old, CEO of Kane Hospitality Group, 11 restaurants, 4 cities, and a magazine profile last year that called her the sharpest knife in the drawer, which she'd had framed. Ms. Kane. Marcus practically levitated. We weren't expecting. That's the point of an inspection, Marcus. She didn't slow down. If you're expecting it, it's a performance. She walked the floor the way generals walk a formation, straightened a fork on table 6 without breaking stride, stopped a busser mid-step and pointed at his shoes. Those are scuffed. Ma'am, Scuffed shoes say I don't care. Do you care? Yes, ma'am. Then buy polish. It's $4. She kept walking, and the kid stood there with his ears burning, and Ethan 3 tables away thought, he makes $11 an hour and he's got a baby at home, and you just spent $4 of his money in 1 sentence. He kept his face still. He was good at that. But Vanessa Kane had a talent, and her talent was finding the one still face in a room. She stopped. You! Ethan turned. Ma'am? What's your name? Ethan Carter. How long have you worked here? Ethan Carter. 14 months. 14 months. She looked him over the shirt, the hands, the shoes. His shoes were spotless. He'd shined them at 5 a.m. with a rag and a 2-year-old tin. And in 14 months has anyone promoted you? No, ma'am. Why do you think that is? The room had gone quiet in that particular way. 3 servers had found reasons to be nearby. Marcus was watching with the expression of a man enjoying something he'd deny enjoying. Ethan said, "You'd have to ask them, ma'am." "No," Vanessa smiled. "I'm asking you, because I find that people usually know. Deep down, they know exactly why they're standing where they're standing." She tilted her head. "So, why are you still carrying plates at 35? There was a version of that question that was cruel, and a version that was worse. The version where she genuinely wanted the answer, the way a scientist wants a data point." Ethan looked at her. For half a second something moved behind his eyes. Something old and very, very still. Then it was gone. "Because that's the job I have," he said. "And people are hungry." Vanessa Kane blinked. It wasn't the answer. It wasn't any of the answers, not the excuse, not the apology, not the ambition speech. It landed in the middle of the floor, like a stone dropped in a still pond, and for one strange second, the sharpest knife in the drawer had nothing to cut. She said, and she walked away. Marcus caught up to Ethan at the server station. "What the hell was that?" She asked a question. I answered it. "You embarrassed her." "I don't think I did." "You did." Marcus jabbed a finger at his chest. "And she doesn't forget. Ever. You just put yourself on a list, Carter, and there's only one way off that list." Ethan picked up a water pitcher. "Copy that," he said. Mid. At 9:50, his phone buzzed in his apron. Server phones were a written warning. He checked it anyway, because there were exactly 2 numbers on Earth he'd take a warning for. It was one of them. Mrs. D. She spiked to 100, 1.4. Gave her the Tylenol. "She's okay. Sleeping. Don't panic." Ethan stood perfectly still in the middle of the service corridor. 101.4. The rule was 100.4. The rule was 100.4. And you call the on-call, and the on-call says bring her in. And bringing her in was an emergency room. And an emergency room was... He did the math without wanting to $1,100 before anyone touched her. He typed with one thumb. "Recheck in 30. Under the arm, not the ear. Text me the number. Mrs. D. Ethan. She's okay. Text me the number." He put the phone away. His hands were steady. His hands were always steady. That was the thing people never understood about him. The steadier his hands got, the worse it was inside. He picked up 4 plates, 3 on the left arm, 1 in the right hand, a carry that most servers needed a tray for, and walked back onto the floor and smiled at table 12 and said, "Who had the halibut?" And nobody in that restaurant knew that a man was standing in front of them doing the hardest thing he'd done all year, which was not running out the door. At 10:15, table 19 asked for the check. At 10:16, the man at table 19 looked at the bill and said, "This is wrong." "I'm sorry, sir. Let me take a look." "You charged me for 2 bottles of the Cabernet." Ethan looked. "Yes, sir. You ordered a second one at 9:20. "No, I didn't." "I'm sorry, sir." "Are you calling me a liar?" There it was, the trapdoor. Every server knows it, and every server knows there's no floor underneath. "No, sir, not at all. I'll take it off right now." "That's a $400 bottle." "I understand, sir. It's already off." The man leaned back satisfied, and then because some people can't stop at winning, he said it loud, casual to his friends. "Honestly, it's not his fault. Look at him. You think a guy like this can count to 400? The table laughed. Ethan Carter stood there with the check presenter in his hands and felt something in his chest go quiet. Not angry. Quiet. 6 years ago, in a place he could not name in a country he was not supposed to have been in. Ethan Carter had knelt in the dirt with a 19-year-old's blood pumping through his fingers and counted compressions out loud while the world came apart 40 yards away. He had counted to 400 that night. He'd counted to 400 twice. He looked at the man at table 19, and he said, "Thank you, sir. I'll bring the new total." That's it. That's what he said. Because the man at table 19 had a wife and probably kids, And Ethan had learned in the worst possible way that everybody's somebody's father, and because his daughter had a fever of 101.4, and because pride was a luxury item, and he'd sold his years ago. He walked to the terminal. His hands were steady. The busser, the kid with the scuffed shoes, Danny, 19 years old, was standing there. He'd heard the whole thing. "Man," Danny said. "How do you do that?" "Do what?" "Just take it. Every night. He literally called you stupid in front of—" Danny stopped. "I'd have thrown the wine at him." Ethan punched in the void code. "You throw the wine," he said. "You feel great for 9 seconds. "Yeah, but—" "And then you're unemployed." "Yeah, but at least you'd have your—" Danny caught himself. "Sorry." "Say it." "Your dignity." Ethan finished the void. He handed Danny a stack of napkins. "Dignity's what you have when nobody's looking," he said, "not what you take from a stranger in front of an audience." He nodded at table 19. "That guy, he doesn't have any. That's why he needs mine." Danny stared at him. "Where'd you learn that?" "Bus 12, Ethan said. "Table 4, but it wasn't Bus 12. It was a fire base outside a village whose name he'd never say out loud again, and a master chief who'd told him the same thing while stitching a kid's forehead by flashlight, and who'd been dead for 6 years now, and whose voice Ethan still heard every single day. At 10:44, his phone buzzed. "Mrs. D, 99.8. Under the arm. She's fine. She asked if you'd read the note yet." Ethan closed his eyes for 1 full second. 1. Then he opened them and went back to work. They closed at 11:30. Ethan counted his tips at the bar while Marcus did the deposit. $142. He knew what that was before he finished counting. He didn't think in dollars anymore. He thought in 11 days of the anti-rejection meds, or 4 days of the other one or half of Thursday's infusion copay. "Carter." Marcus from the office. "Come here." Ethan came. Marcus was leaning back in his chair with the look of a man about to enjoy himself. "Saturday. Private event. Whole restaurant's bought out." "Okay." "Kane's running it personally. Some Navy thing, Admiral's defense contractors, a couple of senators' people. Big money, big brass, big deal." "Okay." "She wants her A-team on the floor." Marcus paused, savoring it. "She specifically asked for you." Ethan's face didn't move. "Why?" "You know why." "No." Marcus smiled. "Because she wants to watch you. She wants to see if the guy with the smart mouth can hold up under pressure. And when you can't," he shrugged, "she'll have watched it herself, clean." "I don't have a smart mouth." "You've got the smartest mouth in this building, Carter, and you don't say a word. That's what's so annoying about you." Ethan stood there. 14 hours, double shift. Saturday. He thought about Thursday's copay. What's it pay? Marcus blinked. He'd expected something else. Fear, maybe. Anger. A little begging would have been nice. Double time, plus event share. "I'll be here at 6, Ethan said, and turned to go. "Carter." He stopped in the doorway. "You get one shot at this," Marcus said. "One. She doesn't do second chances. That night in that room, you are invisible. You pour, you clear, you disappear. You do not speak, you do not exist. You understand me. Ethan Carter, 35 years old. $142 in his pocket. A daughter at 99.8 and falling a Navy Cross in a shoebox in his closet that he had never once shown to another living soul. Looked at his manager and nodded. "Copy that," he said. The bus got him home at 12:40. Mrs. Delgado met him at the door with her coat already on. "She's out cold. 98.6 last check." "Thank you." She waited up till 11. Mrs. D pulled her scarf on. "She wanted to tell you she got 100 on her spelling." Ethan's throat did something. Yeah. At the door she stopped. "Ethan, can I say a thing?" "You're going to anyway. That job is eating you." That job is buying her medicine. And what's buying you? He didn't have an answer. She hadn't expected him to. She patted his cheek like he was 12 years old and let herself out. Ethan went into Lily's room. She was face down in the pillow, one arm hanging off the mattress blanket, kicked to the floor like always. He picked it up. Covered her. Her lunch bag was on the nightstand. Open. The note was on the pillow beside her, unfolded, read. The bravest thing anybody does is show up. And underneath in blue crayon in the handwriting of an 8.5-year-old, you show up every day. Ethan Carter sat down on the floor next to his daughter's bed in his uniform that smelled like other people's dinners, with $142 in his pocket and 14 hours ahead of him on Saturday. And for the first time in a very long time, he put his face in his hands. He didn't make a sound. He'd been trained not to, but his shoulders shook. And out in the closet on the top shelf behind the winter coats, inside a shoebox with a rubber band around it, there was a folded flag and a photograph of 11 men in the desert and a medal in a blue case that the United States Navy does not give away twice, and a discharge form. And on that form, in a box marked rating, there were 3 words that not one single person at Grand Harbor had ever bothered to ask about. Hospital Corpsman Special Amphibious Reconnaissance. Saturday was in 4 days. 4 days went by the way they always did, which is to say, too fast and not fast enough. And on Thursday morning, Ethan Carter sat in a plastic chair in an infusion suite on the 3rd floor of Centera, Norfolk, and watched a nurse named Priya find the port under his daughter's collarbone on the first try, which was the only mercy that we gave him. "You're good at that," Lily said. "I've had practice, sweetheart. My dad's good at it too. He does my flushes at home." Priya glanced up. "Is that right?" "He's better than the lady who came in June," Lily said. "That lady poked me twice." Lily. "She did. She was doing her job. You never poke me twice." Priya was looking at Ethan now with a small line between her eyebrows, the way people look at a thing that doesn't add up. "You do her flushes. Home Health signed off on it," Ethan said. "Sure, but most parents can't. Most parents won't even watch." She taped the line down. "You've got hands." "I've got a kid," Ethan said. "Same thing." Priya let it drop, and the pump started its slow tick, and Ethan sat there for 3 hours and 40 minutes with his daughter's feet in his lap while she did a word search, and at 11:20, the billing coordinator came in with a clipboard and a face already apologizing. "Mr. Carter, I hate to do this here." "Then don't do it here." The prior authorization on the maintenance therapy came back. Ethan looked at Lily. Lily was very carefully looking at her word search, which meant she was listening to every syllable. "Hallway," Ethan said. In the hallway, the coordinator said the word denied, and then said a lot of other words, and Ethan heard maybe a third of them because the part of his brain that handled emergencies had already come online, and it did not care about the other 2/3. "What's the appeal window?" 30 days, but the therapy can't lapse. "So what happens on day 1 of the lapse?" "We'd move to self-pay." "Which is what?" The coordinator told him. Ethan didn't blink. He'd trained himself out of blinking a long time ago. He said, "Per month." "Per month." "Okay." "Mr. Carter, there are foundations. There are grant programs. I can start the paperwork today, but they take 6 to 8 weeks, and I don't want you to think that's a..." "Start the paperwork," Ethan said, and went back in and sat down and picked up his daughter's feet and said, "How many words you got left?" "Bug. 4. "Which ones?" "Courage, kindness, whatever, and something. Whatever isn't a word in a word search. It is if it's in there." "Show me." She showed him. It was in there. "Huh," Ethan said. "Well, there you go." And that was Thursday. At 5:58 on Saturday evening, Ethan Carter came through the service door of Grand Harbor with his uniform in a garment bag and a number in his head that had 11 digits worth of gravity, and Marcus was standing at the schedule board with a highlighter and the expression of a man who had been waiting all day to be a person. "You're 2 minutes early." "You said 6. "I said 6 and I meant 5:30. Marcus capped the highlighter. "This is a Kane event, Carter. Kane events you come early. You didn't say that. You should have known. Copy that. Don't do that. Do what? That thing where you agree with me so hard it's an insult. Ethan pulled the garment bag off his shoulder. I'm agreeing with you, Marcus. See, that's exactly what I mean. At 6:14, the whole staff was lined up in the private dining room, and Vanessa Kane walked the line like she was reviewing troops, which was a joke that nobody in that room was equipped to appreciate, except one man, and he had his eyes on the wall. 38 guests, Vanessa said. I'm going to tell you who they are because I want you to understand what tonight is. Table 1. Rear Admiral Catherine Voss, Navy Region, Mid-Atlantic. Table 1. Assistant Secretary of Defense, Robert Hale. Table 3. 4 people from Arcanine Defense Systems, who are about to sign a contract with a number in it that would buy this building 9 times. Table 2. 2 senators' chiefs of staff, 1 congressman, and a man from the Pentagon, whose title I'm not permitted to say out loud. She stopped in front of Danny. Shoes. Danny lifted a foot. They gleamed. Better, Vanessa said, and kept walking, and Danny exhaled like he'd been underwater. Here's what tonight is, Vanessa said. Tonight is the difference between Kane Hospitality being a regional restaurant group and Kane Hospitality having the federal contract for every officers' club catering event on the Eastern Seaboard. That's $11 million. That's my next 4 years. And it lives or dies on whether 38 people have the smoothest 2 hours of their lives in this room. She stopped in front of Ethan. Carter. Ma'am. You've got table 1. Somebody down the line made a sound. Marcus's head came up so fast it clicked. Ms. Kane, Marcus said. Table 1 is the Admiral and the Assistant Secretary. I had Dominic on. I know what I had. Ms. Kane respectfully Carter's a 14-month server and table 1 is Marcus. Vanessa didn't turn around. When I want your opinion, I'll schedule it. The room got very quiet. She looked at Ethan. Ethan looked back, and there was something in her face that he'd seen exactly once before at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday night, and it was not kindness. It was curiosity, which is a much more dangerous thing. 14 months and nobody promoted you, Vanessa said. And you told me it's because people are hungry. Yes, ma'am. So tonight, the hungriest people in the state of Virginia are sitting at table 1. She smiled, and it had teeth in it. Let's see what you've got. Yes, ma'am. And Carter? She was already moving. You don't speak unless spoken to. Not one word. Understand? Yes, ma'am. At 6:41, Danny caught him at the polish station. Dude. Danny. She's setting you up. I know. Like she's actively setting you up. Table 1. You know what happens if you drop one plate at table 1. I know. So why are you smiling? Ethan looked at him. I'm not smiling. You're smiling on the inside, man, I can tell, and honestly, that's worse. Ethan folded a napkin. Double time and event share is $410, he said. That's the number. That's why I'm here. Everything else is noise. $410. $410. For 14 hours of getting hunted. For $410, Ethan said, I'd let her hunt me on horseback. At 7:05, the guests came in. They came in the way that kind of money always comes in loud and easy, like the room owed them something, and Ethan stood against the wall with his hands behind his back and read every single one of them before they sat down. It wasn't a decision. It was a reflex he'd never been able to put away. The Admiral came in first and took the seat facing the door without appearing to choose it. The Assistant Secretary Hale came in laughing at something and stopped laughing the second he was inside, which meant the laugh was a tool. The Arcanine people moved as a unit, and one of them, the youngest, kept touching his tie, and a big man in a gray suit at table 2 sat down with his back to the room and did not look at a single person all night, and Ethan clocked him at 4 seconds and thought that's the one they said they can't say the title of, and he's the only one here who's actually working. Water, sir. Please, said Robert Hale, and did not look up. At 7:22, the Admiral said, What's your name, son? Ethan had been pouring. He kept pouring. Ethan, ma'am. Ethan what? Ethan Carter, ma'am. Rear Admiral Catherine Voss was 61 years old and had a face like a closed file. She looked at him for a second and a half. Huh, she said, and turned back to her conversation. That was all. That was the entire exchange, and from 30 feet away Vanessa Kane, who missed nothing, watched an admiral look at her waiter for a second and a half and filed it. At 7:48, the Arcadine man with the tie whose name was Preston snapped his fingers. Ethan came. We're going to need another bottle of the Pinot, Preston said. And listen, buddy, when the glass is at the halfway mark, that's your cue. Okay? You don't wait for me to ask. Halfway mark. Can you remember that? Yes, sir. Say it back. Ethan said, halfway mark, sir. There you go. Preston turned to the table. See, you just have to be clear with them. One of the other Arcadian people, a woman, said, Preston, in a low voice. What? Nothing. Ethan brought the Pinot. He decanted it. He did not spill a drop, and he did not look at Preston's face, and at 7:53, he was back at the wall with his hands behind his back, and his pulse had not moved one single beat. At 8:10, Vanessa Kane came up beside him. You didn't react. To what, ma'am? To that. There wasn't anything to react to. He humiliated you in front of 11 people. He ordered a bottle of wine, ma'am. Vanessa turned and looked at him properly for the first time all night. You know what I think, Carter? No, ma'am. I think you're proud. I think you're the proudest man in this building, and you've built an entire personality out of pretending you're not, and I think that's the most exhausting way a person can live. She sipped nothing from an empty hand, a habit. I'd rather you threw the wine. Would you fire me if I threw the wine? Instantly. Then no, you wouldn't, ma'am. Vanessa Kane's mouth opened about a quarter inch, and then Marcus was there saying something about the kitchen, and she was gone, and Ethan stood against the wall and thought that was one word too many, and knew it, and couldn't take it back. At 8:31, his phone buzzed twice in his apron. 2 buzzes meant Mrs. Delgado. 1 buzz was everything else in the world. He couldn't check it. Vanessa was 18 feet away with a clear line of sight, and there was a man from the Pentagon at table 2, and he had $410 riding on the next 3 hours. It buzzed twice again at 8:33. His hand stayed perfectly steady, which was how you'd know if you knew him, and nobody there knew him. At 8:40, Danny slid past with a bus tub and said out of the side of his mouth, Your phone's going off, man. I can hear it from the pass. I know. You want me to check it? Ethan looked at him. Give me 30 seconds, Danny said. I'm a busser. Nobody sees me. And Ethan Carter, who had never once in 14 months asked anybody in that building for anything, handed a 19-year-old kid his phone. At 8:44, Danny came back. His face had gone a color. What? It's fine. Danny. It's a lady named Mrs. D, she says, and I quote, don't panic. What's the second one? Ethan. What's the second one? Danny swallowed. It says 102.1. Ethan Carter stood very still in the corner of a private dining room in Norfolk, Virginia, with a linen napkin over his forearm. 38 of the most important people in the mid-Atlantic eating scallops 9 feet away, and did the only calculation that mattered. 102.1. Neutropenic. The rule was 100.4. He needed to leave. He could not leave. If he left, he was fired. And if he was fired, there was no $410, and no $410 in a month. Where the word denied had come back on a clipboard was not an inconvenience. It was a door closing. Ethan, Danny said. Man, your face. My face is fine. Your face is not fine. Text her back, Ethan said. Exact words. Recheck axillary in 20. If it's over 102.5, call Centera Pediatric Oncology. On-call the numbers in the fridge magnet and tell them the name Lily Carter and the word neutropenic. That word. Say that word first. Danny stared at him. The word what? Neutropenic. N-E-U. How do you know how to spell that? Text her Danny. At 8:51, Robert Hale, Assistant Secretary of Defense, laughed at his own story with a piece of filet in his mouth and put a hand up to say, "Wait, wait. The best part is coming," and inhaled. Ethan Carter was 40 feet away facing the wall, doing math about a fever. He heard it before anybody saw it. Not a cough. There was no cough. That's what people never understand. The sound was a thin scrape of nothing, a man trying to move air through a door that had closed, and it lasted about a second and a half, and it was the loudest thing in that room to exactly one person in it. Ethan turned around. At 8:52, the woman next to Hale said, "Bob." At 8:52, Hale stood up out of his chair with both hands at his collar and his face going the color of a plum and his eyes doing the thing that eyes do, and a fork hit a plate somewhere, and Admiral Voss said, "Bob." And somebody at table 3 said, "Is he choking? He's choking." And somebody else said, "Give him water," which is the single stupidest sentence in the English language, and a chair went over backward, and 38 people who ran contracts and commands and committees looked at each other and did absolutely nothing at all. That's the part nobody believes. They think there's screaming. There isn't. There's 4 seconds of total silence while everybody waits for somebody else. Ethan Carter crossed the room in those 4 seconds. He didn't run. He arrived. "Sir, I'm going to help you." He was already behind Hale. His left hand went across the man's chest palm flat, and his right hand hooked the wrist and pulled the whole body back against him. And he dropped his stance so Hale's weight came off his own feet, and he said in a voice that was not loud, but that went through that room like a rail spike, "Everybody move back, now." They moved back. Ethan's fist found the spot above the navel. Not by feel, by count. Thumb side and other hand over, and he drove it in and up hard, and Hale's whole body jackknifed, and nothing came out. Again. Ethan said to nobody. Second thrust, nothing. "Sir, stay with me." Third, nothing. Somebody was screaming now. Now they were screaming. Somebody said, "Call 911," and somebody else said, I am. And Vanessa Kane was standing frozen in the doorway with her hand over her mouth, and Marcus was making a sound like a kettle. At 8:53 and 40 seconds, Robert Hale went limp. That is the moment. Not the choking, the limp. Because a man fighting is a man with air debt, and a man limp is a man with a clock, and the clock is 4 minutes long, and then he never comes back the way he was. Ethan lowered him. He did not drop him. He went down with him, controlled one hand behind the head so it didn't crack on the marble, and he had the man flat on his back in under 2 seconds. "You," Ethan said, and pointed at Admiral Voss without looking at her. "Time me. Say it out loud every 15 seconds. And Rear Admiral Catherine Voss, United States Navy, looked at her watch and said, "Mark." Ethan straddled Hale's thighs. Heel of the hand above the navel. He drove 5 abdominal thrusts in, and they were not the polite thing from the poster on the break room wall. They were the real thing, and the third one lifted the man's shoulders off the floor. 15, said Voss. Nothing. Ethan's fingers went into Hale's mouth. Hooked swept came out empty. "He's not obstructed at the pharynx," Ethan said. "It's deeper. Sir, if you can hear me, you're going to be okay." 30. Ethan rolled him. Nobody expected that. He rolled a sitting Assistant Secretary of Defense onto his side like a sack of feed, one knee braced, and delivered 5 back blows between the shoulder blades with the heel of his hand, and they cracked across that dining room like gunshots, and a woman at table 3 burst into tears. 45. "Come on," Ethan said. Quiet, almost gentle. "Come on, brother." 5th blow. Something hit the marble floor and skidded 11 feet and stopped against the leg of table 2. It was a piece of steak the size of a walnut. Robert Hale's whole body convulsed, and he pulled in a breath that sounded like a man coming up out of a lake, and then another. And then he was coughing, retching, alive, and Ethan had him on his side already with a hand behind his head and one at his hip, and was saying, "Slow, slow. Don't gulp, sir. Small breaths. That's it. That's it. You're okay. You're okay." 57 seconds, said Admiral Voss, and her voice had gone strange. Ethan had 2 fingers on the carotid. "Sir, what's your name?" "Bob. Bob Hale." "Where are you, sir?" "Restaurant. I was talking." "You were talking. You still are." Ethan's hand went flat on the man's chest. "Rates high, that's normal. That's adrenaline. Don't stand up. Somebody get me a clean napkin. Not that one, the one on the tray." Somebody got it. It was Preston. Preston from Arcadine, who ran the halfway mark, was kneeling on the floor in his $4,000 suit, handing a waiter a napkin with his hands shaking. "Pulse is 130 thready coming down," Ethan said. "Airways clear. Bilateral chest rise. He's got no lack in the pharynx that I can feel. He's going to have a hell of a bruise on his diaphragm, and he's going to be scared for about 6 hours." He looked up for the first time. "EMS coming. 4 minutes, someone said. "Tell them witnessed foreign body airway obstruction complete roughly 50 seconds to relieve patients conscious and alert. No CPR required, no chest compressions given. Say it exactly like that. They'll want to know if we compressed." The person on the phone said, "Say that again." "Give me the phone." They gave him the phone. At 8:56, and change in a private dining room in Norfolk, Virginia, a 35-year-old waiter knelt on the floor with a man's head steadied on his knee and gave a clean, flat, unhurried handoff report to a 911 dispatcher in language that dispatcher had heard maybe 4 times in her career and never once from a civilian. Then he handed the phone back and said, "Sir, I'm going to keep you on your side till they get here. Squeeze my hand." Hale squeezed his hand, and then Hale started to cry, the way men that age cry, which is silently and with terrible dignity, and he did not let go of Ethan Carter's hand for 2 full minutes. Nobody in that room moved. Admiral Voss had not moved either. She was standing 4 feet away with her watch still in her hand, and she was looking at the waiter with an expression that had nothing to do with gratitude. It was recognition. It was a woman looking at a card trick she'd seen performed by exactly one kind of person in her entire life, and never not one time by a man in an apron. "Son," she said, "where did you learn that?" And Ethan Carter, who had never lied to a superior officer in his life, and had gotten very good at not needing to said Red Cross class, ma'am. Admiral Voss's eyes went flat as ice. "No," she said. "It wasn't." At 8:59, Vanessa Kane crossed the room. Here is what nobody understood then, or later, and what Vanessa Kane would spend the rest of her life trying to explain to herself at 3 in the morning. She had watched from that doorway for 57 seconds, and she had not moved. Not one step. She had stood there with her hand over her mouth while $11 million died on her floor, and the only thing her body did in that entire minute was fail her. And then it was over, and Bob Hale was breathing, and Vanessa Kane's brain came back online, and the first thing it produced was not relief. It was rage. Because she had been watched not moving by 38 people, by an admiral. And the man who had moved was a 14-month server making $13 an hour who had told her 4 days ago that people are hungry, and had told her an hour ago that no, she wouldn't, and had been right both times. "Get up," she said. Ethan didn't look at her. "Ma'am, I'm holding his airway open." "I said get up." "EMS is 90 seconds out. When they take him, I'll get up." "Do you have any idea," Vanessa said, and her voice cracked in the middle of it, "any idea at all what you have done to me?" Marcus said, "Ms. Kane." And she said, "Shut up, Marcus." And Marcus shut up. At 9:01, the paramedics came through the door, and Ethan gave them 30 seconds of report, and they went, "Copied twice," and one of them looked up at him and said, "You a medic?" "No," Ethan said. "I'm a waiter." And he stood up. His apron had blood on it from where Hale's lip had split, and his shirt was soaked through, and his hands were shaking now. Finally, now that it was done, the way hands do, and he put them behind his back so nobody would see, which was the single most Ethan Carter thing he had done all night. Vanessa Kane was standing in front of him. 38 people were watching. "You," she said, "put your hands on a member of the cabinet." The room made a sound. "Ms. Kane," said Admiral Voss. You put your hands on him, you threw him on the floor, you rolled him in front of Arcadine, in front of the Pentagon, and you didn't wait 10 seconds for a professional. And if that man has one cracked rib, one bruise, this company is finished. Do you understand me? Do you have any concept of liability of what a lawsuit from him looks like? He was blue, ma'am. Do not speak. He had about 90 seconds of brain left. I said do not speak. Ms. Kane, said Voss louder. Vanessa turned on her. With respect, Admiral, this is my restaurant and my employee and my problem. And then she turned back and she said the thing. She said it because she was cornered and because she had frozen, and because 38 of the most powerful people in Virginia had watched her freeze, and because the only way out of a room like that for a person built like her was to find something smaller than herself and stand on it. You want to know what you are, Vanessa Kane said. You're a waiter. You're a poor 35-year-old no future, no education waiter who carries plates for a living. And you decided with no training, no license, no authority, to put your hands on a man worth more than every person in your entire family tree. Because you wanted a moment. Because for 1 minute, you wanted to be somebody. Ethan Carter said nothing. Well, congratulations, Vanessa said. You got your moment. And she reached up and she took hold of the plastic name tag on his chest and she ripped it off, and it took a piece of the shirt with it, and she turned and dropped it into a water glass on table 1. It sank. It made a small sound. There, she said. Now you're exactly what you've always been. Nobody. You're done. Get out of my building. Somebody at table 3 said, Jesus Christ. Preston from Arcadine said out loud, Ma'am, he just saved that man's life. And Vanessa said, Sit down, Preston. And Preston, 44 years old, sat down. Danny was standing by the kitchen door with his hands over his mouth, and he was crying, and he was 19. And he'd remember that minute when he was 70. And Ethan Carter, 35, whose daughter had a fever of 102.1, and whose prior authorization had come back, denied on Thursday, and who had come to work that night for $410. That he was now never going to see, looked at Vanessa Kane. And what he felt, God help him, was not rage. It was something worse. It was pity. Because he had seen that exact face before on 19-year-olds, right after they froze, right after the first time, right when they realized what they were made of and needed somebody, anybody to be smaller than them for 10 seconds, so they could survive the next 10 minutes. He'd held those kids while they shook. He looked at her and she saw it. She saw the pity, and it went into her like a knife, and she opened her mouth, and nothing came out. Ma'am, Ethan said, tell them to check his sternum at the hospital. He's got tenderness on the left. It's probably the thrusts. It's probably nothing. But tell them. Then he untied his apron. He folded it. He didn't throw it. He folded it in 3, the way he'd folded 1,000 things in his life. And he set it on the corner of table 1, next to a water glass with a name tag at the bottom of it. And he walked out of the private dining room and through the kitchen and past the line cook who said, Carter, and got no answer, and out the service door into the parking lot at 9:08 on a Saturday night in Norfolk, Virginia, with $11 in his pocket and a bus that wasn't coming for 19 minutes. He got about 40 feet. Then he stopped and put his hands on his knees and breathed. And the shaking came all the way up and out of him at once, because it always waits until you're alone. And he stood in a parking lot behind a restaurant and let it have him for exactly 11 seconds. Then he stood up. Then he did the math. $410 gone. 13 an hour gone. 14 months of references gone. Rent on the 9th. Infusion Thursday. 30-day appeal window on a denial letter. And a little girl at 102.1 who was waiting up. Ethan Carter took his phone out of his pocket and texted Mrs. Delgado 4 words. On my way home. And he started walking because $11 was $11, and the bus was for people who had a job. He made it 11 steps. And then the whole parking lot lit up white, and the puddles started to jump, and the sound came down on him from above like the sky had cleared its throat. A sound he had not heard in 6 years. and that his body recognized before his brain did a sound that put him flat against the wall with his forearm over his face, out of pure reflex. Ethan Carter looked up into 200 feet of rotor wash, and every window in the front of Grand Harbor filled with faces. The first thing his body did was lie to him. It told him he was 29 years old, and there was sand in his teeth, and the bird coming in meant somebody was already bleeding, and Ethan Carter went flat against that brick wall with his forearm over his eyes and his heart going like a hammer on a fence post. And for about 3 full seconds, he was not in a parking lot in Norfolk, Virginia at all. Then he heard a car alarm go off, and that brought him back because they didn't have car alarms out there. He lowered his arm. At 9:11, a Navy MH-60 Seahawk put its wheels down on the asphalt of a restaurant parking lot in the city of Norfolk, 30 feet from a dumpster, and the whole world went white and loud and violent, and every napkin, every menu, every valet ticket in a 50-foot radius went straight up into the air like the place had exploded. Ethan Carter stood there in a soaked white shirt with no name tag on it, and thought very clearly with the strange flat calm that had kept him alive for 6 years. That's a 60. That's not a medevac config. That's somebody's ride. Then the door came open. At 9:12, the first man out was a lieutenant, maybe 26, and he came off that bird at a dead run with a folder under his arm and his cover jammed in his belt, because you don't wear one under rotors, and he ran straight past Ethan Carter without seeing him. Straight past, 6 feet away. Because Ethan Carter was a man in a stained white shirt standing next to a dumpster, and people do not see that man. The lieutenant hit the front doors of Grand Harbor with his shoulder and went inside, and Ethan stood there in the wash with his eyes stinging and thought, At 9:12 and 40 seconds, the second man came off, and the second man was not 26. The second man was 58 years old, and he came down slow, and he had a gut on him now that he hadn't had before, and gray in what was left of his hair. And he stopped at the bottom of the step and put his hands on his hips and turned in a slow circle, scanning the way a man scans who has spent 30 years finding one specific person in the middle of something loud. His eyes went across Ethan, then came back, and stopped. At 9:13, Master Chief Ray Dunlap, United States Navy, stood in a restaurant parking lot in the middle of a hurricane of his own making and said one word that nobody could hear over the rotors, and Ethan Carter read it off his mouth from 40 feet away. Doc. And that was the moment Ethan Carter's face came apart. Not before. Not when she ripped the tag off his chest. Not when she said nobody. Not when he did the math on $410 in a parking lot with $11 in his pocket. Right then, at the sight of a fat old man with gray hair standing in the wash of a Seahawk saying, Doc. Because Ray Dunlap was supposed to be dead. Ray Dunlap had been dead for 6 years. Ethan had put that in the ground himself. Ethan had a folded flag in a shoebox and a photograph of 11 men, and he had counted the 11 every single night for 6 years. And Ray Dunlap was number 4 from the left, and Ray Dunlap was dead. At 9:14, the rotors came down to idle, and the noise dropped enough for a human voice, and Ray Dunlap crossed that parking lot and said, "You look like hell, Doc." Ethan Carter couldn't make a sound. "Yeah," Ray said. "I know. You're dead. I'm not. I carried you." Ethan's voice broke in half. "I carried you 900 meters. You were gone before the bird. They told me. They told me you were gone at the FARP. They told me—" "I was gone for 9 minutes," Ray said. "I came back on the table in Landstuhl, and I spent 14 months learning how to hold a fork." He held up his left hand. 2 fingers didn't move. "And when I came back, they'd already boxed you out of the unit and sealed the whole thing. And by the time I could ask a question, the answer was above my clearance. Which is a hell of a sentence to hear about your own damn corpsman. They gave me a flag. They gave you the wrong flag." Ray put his good hand on the back of Ethan's neck hard the way old men do when they can't say anything. 6 years, Doc. 6 years I've been looking. You went off the grid like you owed money." "I did owe money." Ray laughed, and it broke, and he pulled Ethan Carter's forehead down onto his shoulder, and a 35-year-old man in a waiter's shirt stood in a parking lot and shook. At 9:15, the lieutenant came back out of the restaurant at a run and said, "Master Chief." They say he's not here. They say he left, they say. And then he stopped because he'd found him. Ray didn't let go. Sir, the lieutenant said. Are you Ethan Carter? Ethan stood up. He wiped his face with his sleeve once, and that was all, and his face went back to being a closed door. Yes. Sir, I need to confirm your identity. Can you state your last four? Lieutenant, Ray said. Put the folder down. Master Chief Protocol says. Protocol says. Ray finally let go of Ethan's neck. Son, I've known this man since he was a 23-year-old kid who couldn't grow a mustache, and I watched him keep 4 Marines and 1 very stupid Master Chief alive on a mountain with 3 units of blood and a headlamp. You want his last 4? Ask me. I got it tattooed. The lieutenant looked at Ethan. Ethan said, 4196. The lieutenant looked at the folder. His shoulders dropped about an inch, and something in his face changed completely, and he came to attention right there in a restaurant parking lot in the middle of the night. HM1 Carter, he said. Rear Admiral Voss request your presence inside. Voss, Ethan said. Yes, sir. The Admiral at table 1. Yes, sir. And Ethan Carter looked at the front windows of Grand Harbor, and every single one of them was full of faces. At 9:17, Vanessa Kane was standing in the middle of her own dining room, with her phone in her hand and no one to call. She had been trying for 4 minutes. She'd tried her attorney. She'd tried her PR firm. She'd tried her father, which she hadn't done in 11 years, and it had gone to voicemail, and she'd hung up before the beep. Because the helicopter had come down at 9:11, and the second it touched, 38 people had turned around and looked at her, and she had understood in a way she could not put words to, yet that something enormous was about to happen, and that she was standing directly underneath it. Ms. Kane. Marcus was at her elbow, and his voice had gone up half an octave. Ms. Kane, there's a helicopter in the... I see it, Marcus. They're asking for Carter. They came in, and they asked for Carter. They said his name. They had a folder with his name on. I see it, Marcus. What do we do? Vanessa Kane. 39 years old, CEO of Kane Hospitality Group. Sharpest knife in the drawer, said, I don't know. And Marcus stared at her because he had worked for her for 6 years and had never once heard her say those 3 words in that order. At 9:18, Admiral Catherine Voss was standing at table 1 with her reading glasses on and her phone against her ear, and she was saying, No, read me the citation, the whole thing, I'll wait. Preston from Arcadine was standing 8 feet away with his hands in his pockets and his tie undone, and he was watching the parking lot, and he said to nobody, I told him about the halfway mark. The woman from Arcadine said, Preston, I told a man about the halfway mark on a wine glass, Preston said. I made him say it back to me. I made him say it back. Preston, stop. He said it back, Preston said. He said halfway mark, sir. At 9:19, the doors of Grand Harbor opened and Ethan Carter walked back into the building he'd been thrown out of 11 minutes earlier. He came in with a Master Chief on his left and a lieutenant on his right, and he still had no name tag, and his shirt still had another man's blood on it, and he was still by every measure that room understood a waiter. And every human being in that dining room stood up, not all at once. It started with Preston, who was already standing. Then Admiral Voss put her phone down and got to her feet, and when a rear admiral stands, other things happen, and the man from the Pentagon with his back to the room stood up and turned around, for the first time all night, and then chairs were going back everywhere. 38 people and a woman in a gown at table 3 had her hand over her mouth, and nobody was talking. Ethan stopped about 6 feet in. He looked at all of them, and what he wanted more than he had wanted anything in 6 years was to be back in that parking lot. Ma'am, he said to Voss, I'd like to go home. My daughter's sick. At 9:20, Admiral Catherine Voss said, Son, I know. And that hit the room harder than the helicopter had. How? Ethan said. Because I spent the last 9 minutes on the phone with a 2-star who spent the last 4 minutes reading me a citation I was never cleared to see, Voss said. And because when I asked him why a man with that citation is pouring my water on a Saturday night, he told me you'd been medically boarded in 2019 honorable, and that you'd walked away clean and never filed a single claim. Not one. No disability, no VA. Nothing. She took her glasses off. And then I asked one of my people to pull your address, and she came back and told me you'd been in the same two-bedroom in Berkeley for 4 years, and that you have a dependent age 8, and that the dependent's name is, ma'am? Lily. Ma'am. The room heard it. The whole room heard a waiter say ma'am to an admiral in a voice like a hand across a table, and heard the admiral stop. You're right, Voss said. I apologize. That's not mine to say out loud. At 9:21, Vanessa Kane said, What is happening in my restaurant? And 38 heads turned. Voss looked at her for a long, long second. Ms. Kane, she said, do you know what a special amphibious reconnaissance corpsman is? No. No? Voss said. Of course you don't. Nobody does. That's rather the point. She put her glasses in her breast pocket. There are about 300 of them alive. They are Navy hospital corpsmen who go through recon and dive school and airborne and 18 months of medicine, and then get attached to the units that don't have names. They are the reason a 19-year-old kid with a femoral bleed at 11,000 feet, 4 hours from a surgical table, wakes up in Germany with both legs. They are not medics. Calling them a medic is like calling this restaurant a diner. Nobody moved. That man, Voss said and pointed, did a real one on your floor tonight, not the poster version, the real one. 57 seconds, and I timed it, and he asked me to time it, which is the part I can't get past, because he asked me to time it before he started, which means he already knew what he was going to do, and how long he had to do it, and Ms. Kane, that is not a thing a person can learn in a Red Cross class. Vanessa said, I didn't know. No. Voss agreed. You didn't. At 9:22, Ray Dunlap said, Ma'am, permission to say something. Master Chief, I'd pay money. Ray turned around and looked at the room. Not at Vanessa. At the room. Y'all want to know about him, he said. Fine. I'll tell you the one that's declassified, and it ain't even the good one. Ray, Ethan said. Shut up, Doc. Ray, I said, shut up, and technically I still outrank you, so shut up. Ray shoved his hands in his pockets. 2019. 11 of us on a hillside where we were not supposed to be. 94 minutes into a thing that was supposed to take 20. We got 4 down. And I want you rich people to understand what 4 down means, because you think it means 4 guys laying there looking sad. It doesn't. It means 4 guys screaming, and 2 of them are screaming for their mothers. And it is dark, and the bird can't come. And the bird can't come is the worst sentence in the English language. The room did not breathe. Doc had 1 headlamp, Ray said, and he put a red filter on it so it wouldn't get us killed. And he worked for 3 hours and 11 minutes in the dark on 4 men alone. He crossed open ground 4 times. He put a chest tube in a Marine with a ballpoint pen barrel because his kit was gone. He gave his own blood out of his own arm into Corporal Danny Ruiz, 22 years old, and then he stood up and kept working. And if you don't know what giving a unit of your own blood does to a man's ability to stand up, I invite you to try it. Preston sat down. He didn't decide to. His legs did it. And number 4 was me, Ray said. I was the last one. And by the time he got to me, he'd been at it for 3 hours, and he was gray, and he was done, and there was nothing in his arms, and he still carried me 900 meters, and then I died on him, right there, in his hands. And that man worked on my dead body for 9 minutes past the point where any human being on this earth would have quit. Ray Dunlap held up his left hand with the 2 fingers that didn't work. And here I am, he said, eating your bread, standing on your floor, 60 pounds heavier, and 1 wife happier, and 2 grandkids richer, and every single second of that is because of a poor 35-year-old waiter with no future who carries plates for a living. The silence in that room had weight. Ma'am, Ray said, and now he looked at Vanessa Kane, and his voice went very soft, which was worse. You dropped his name in a water glass. Vanessa's mouth moved. I watched you do it through the window, Ray said. I was standing right there. I watched you take his name off his chest and drop it in a glass of ice water in front of 38 people about 90 seconds after he pulled a man out of the ground with his bare hands. I didn't know, Vanessa said, and Ray Dunlap said the thing that ended her. Ma'am, he said, you didn't ask. At 9:24, Ethan Carter said, that's enough. Doc. Ray, that's enough. And the strangest thing in that entire room was that the Master Chief stopped. Ethan turned around. He looked at Vanessa Kane, and he was 6 feet from her, and everybody was watching. And this was the moment. This was the exact moment that every person in that room, and every person who would ever hear this story secondhand for the rest of their lives, was waiting for. He had it. He had all of it. He had an admiral, a helicopter, a Master Chief, a cabinet secretary in an ambulance, and 38 witnesses and the woman who had called him. Nobody was standing in front of him with nothing left. He could have taken her apart with one sentence. He said, Ms. Kane, is my last check going to direct deposit, or are you mailing it? Vanessa Kane made a sound. Because if it's mail, Ethan said, I need it to go out Monday. My rent's on the 9th. And that was when she broke. Not at the helicopter, not at the citation, not at you didn't ask. At my rent's on the 9th. Because a threat she could have handled. Rage she could have handled. She had a whole architecture for rage. But a man asking about a paycheck in that room after that with a helicopter idling in her parking lot meant that the entire universe she had built her life on top of, the one where people who carry plates because of what they are, was not just wrong. It was so wrong that the man in front of her didn't even have the time to be angry about it. He had a rent payment. On the 9th. Vanessa Kane put her hand on the back of a chair to stay upright. At 9:26, Admiral Voss said, Carter, 2 minutes. Then Dunlap flies you home himself, and I'll square it with the FAA and my own conscience later. Ma'am, I don't need HM1. Voss's voice snapped like a flag. I've been standing in this room for 15 minutes not saying the thing I actually need to say out of respect. I'm going to say it now. Sit down. Ethan sat down. Voss sat down across from him at table 1. There was still a water glass on it, with a plastic name tag at the bottom. You know why the bird came, she said. Somebody wanted to say thank you. No. Voss almost smiled. Nobody sends a Seahawk to say thank you, son. Do you know what that costs an hour? That bird came because at 9:04 tonight, Bob Hale was on a gurney in the back of an ambulance with an oxygen mask on his face, and he grabbed a paramedic's collar and would not let go until somebody wrote down the name of the waiter. And that name went from the paramedic to Hale's detail, and from his detail to the watch floor, and from the watch floor to a 2-star, and somewhere in the middle of that chain, a computer did what computers do. Voss put a single folded sheet of paper on the table between them. It matched, she said. Ethan looked at the paper. He didn't touch it. There are 11 people in the Department of Defense with a flag on their file that says notify immediately, Voss said. You are one of them. Not because of the medal, Carter. There are plenty of medals. Because of a mission that ran in 2017 that nobody in this room is cleared for, including me. Ma'am, I'm not asking. I'm telling you why the phone rang. Voss leaned forward. When your name came off that ambulance and hit the system, it lit up a board in a building in Virginia that has not lit up in 6 years. And a man who I will not name stood up in a room and said, and I'm quoting, he's alive, he's in Norfolk. Ethan Carter's hands were on the table, and they were perfectly steady. And that's when they sent the bird, Voss said. Not to thank you, to find you. Because as of 45 minutes ago, the United States Navy believed you'd left the country. At 9:29, Ray Dunlap said quietly, Doc, why'd you drop off? Ethan didn't answer. Doc. Because they'd have called me, Ethan said. Nobody understood it. Say again, Voss said. Ethan Carter looked at a water glass with his name in it. If they knew where I was, he said they'd have called me, and if they called me, I'd have gone. That's the whole thing, ma'am. That's the entire thing. There's no version of me where the phone rings and I say no. He looked up. My wife died in 2020. Lily was 2. And I stood in a hospital hallway, and I made her one promise, and the promise wasn't that I'd be a good man, ma'am. It was that I'd be there. And I knew, standing in that hallway, that if I stayed reachable one day, somebody would call and I'd go, because I always go, because that's the only thing I've ever been any good at. The room was so quiet, the idling rotors sounded like the ocean. So I made myself unreachable, Ethan said. I moved. I never filed. I never took the disability because a claim is an address. I took a job where nobody asks you anything, and I made sure nobody ever had a reason to look, and I have carried plates for 4 years and 11 months so that the phone would never ring. He tapped the table once with 2 fingers. And tonight a man choked at table 1, he said. And I looked at him for about a second and a half, and I knew exactly what was going to happen. I knew if I moved, everything I built would come down. I knew it before I took the first step. Ray Dunlap said, "And you went anyway." Ray? Ethan said. He was somebody's father. At 9:31, Vanessa Kane started crying. And she did it silently, and standing up with her hand on a chair in front of everyone, and nobody looked at her. And that was the worst part. At 9:32, Ethan Carter's phone went off in his pocket. 2 buzzes. He had it out before the second one finished, and the whole room watched a man who had not flinched at a helicopter go white. He read it. He read it again. Chair in front of everyone, and nobody looked at her. And that was the worst part. At 9:32, Ethan Carter's phone went off in his pocket. 2 buzzes. He had it out before the second one finished, and the whole room watched a man who had not flinched at a helicopter go white. He read it. He read it again. "Doc?" Ray said. "What?" Ethan stood up so fast the chair went over. "Carter," Voss said. "Ma'am, I have to go." "Carter, what is it?" And Ethan. Carter, who had lied to an admiral 40 minutes earlier and hadn't blinked, said it out loud in front of 38 strangers, because there was no longer one single thing on this earth he had left to protect. "My daughter's temp is 103.2, and she's got rigors and she's neutropenic," he said, "which means she has no immune system at all, and that's not a fever, ma'am. That's sepsis, and I am 40 minutes from my house on a bus that isn't coming." The room made a sound like a wave going out, and Ray Dunlap said one word into his shoulder mic, and the rotors outside came up from idle to a scream, and every window in the front of Grand Harbor started to shake. At 9:33, Ethan Carter was already moving, and Ray Dunlap was moving with him. And the lieutenant got there first and held the door, and 38 people in evening wear watched a waiter with no name tag run out of a restaurant toward a helicopter. "Doc, talk to me," Ray shouted. "Give me the picture." 8 years old, 49 pounds, all in maintenance port. A cath left chest. Absolute neutrophil count was 200 on Thursday. English. "She has no white cells, Ray. None. She's got no army. A cold kills her. Temp 103.2 and climbing, and she's rigoring, which means she's spiking through it. Time to sepsis." And Ethan Carter said the thing that a father should never have to say, and only a corpsman could say correctly. "Every hour without antibiotics is 8% mortality," he said. "Every hour, Ray. That's not a scare number. That's the paper." Ray Dunlap keyed his mic. "Kilo 2, 7 hot start. We are going now. I say again, now." At 9:34, Admiral Catherine Voss came out those doors at a speed that no 61-year-old admiral has any business achieving, with her phone against her ear and her gown hiked up in one fist. "Dunlap." "Ma'am, I'm not asking permission." "I'm not offering any. I'm telling you the receiving hospital." She covered the phone. "Carter, Centera Norfolk General or CHKD." Ethan stopped dead. "Children's," he said. "CHKD. Her oncologist is Dr. Amara Reyes. She's on staff. They have her whole chart. They have her cultures from Thursday. Don't take her to a general ER. They'll do it wrong. They'll wait for labs before they hang anything. They'll—" "Carter." "Ma'am, if they wait for labs, my daughter dies." "Carter." Voss grabbed his forearm. "I am on the phone with the CHKD charge nurse right now. Say the words you need me to say, and I will say them exactly." And Ethan Carter looked at a Rear Admiral of the United States Navy and gave her a report. "Tell them," he said, 8-year-old female. Known all neutropenic fever temp 1032. Axillary and rising rigors present porta cath access patient of Dr. Reyes. Tell them I want cefepime in the door in under 60 minutes, and I want them to draw cultures on the way in, not before on the way in. And if the pharmacy asks for a weight, tell them 22.2 kilos, and don't let anybody round it. Voss repeated it, word for word, not one syllable off. Then she listened, and her face changed, and she said, "Ma'am, this is Rear Admiral Catherine Voss, Navy Region, Mid-Atlantic. And I'm going to say a sentence, and I need you to write it down. There is a United States Navy helicopter inbound to your city, and there is a father on it, and his daughter is Lily Carter. And I am telling you as a flag officer that you will hang that antibiotic on arrival." She listened again. Then she said, "Thank you," and hung up and looked at Ethan. "They already had her in the system," Voss said. "The neighbor called them 9 minutes ago." Ethan Carter closed his eyes for 1 full second. 1. At 9:36, Vanessa Kane was standing in the doorway of her own restaurant with her arms wrapped around herself, and no coat, watching a helicopter spin up in her parking lot, and Marcus was beside her saying something about the valet stand and insurance, and she could not hear one word of it. "Ms. Kane." "Don't." "Ms. Kane, the Arcadine people are asking for their coats." "Then get their coats, Marcus. They're not staying. None of them are staying. Table 2 just walked out the back." "I know." "Ms. Kane, what do I tell?" Vanessa Kane turned around, and Marcus stopped talking because there was something in her face he had never seen in 6 years, and it took him a second to recognize it, and when he did, he wished he hadn't. She looked like a person. "Marcus," she said, "did you know he had a daughter?" "What? 14 months. He worked for you 14 months. Did you know he had a kid?" Marcus opened his mouth. "Did you know she was sick? Ms. Kane? Did you know his name Marcus before tonight? Not Carter. His name." Marcus said nothing. "Neither did I," Vanessa said, and walked back into her empty dining room. At 9:37, Ethan Carter put a helmet on for the first time in 6 years, and his hands did it without asking him. Chin strap cord, ICS. Jack the whole thing in 4 seconds muscle memory, the way you never lose how to ride a bike, and Ray Dunlap watched him do it and had to look out the window. "Doc." "What?" "Nothing." "Say it." 6 years, Ray said. 6 years and you did that in 4 seconds. Ethan pulled the strap. Some things don't leave. At 9:38, they came off the deck and Norfolk went sideways underneath them, and Ethan Carter sat in the back of a Seahawk in a waiter's shirt with another man's blood on it, and looked out at a city he had spent 5 years hiding in. "Kilo 27 Tower, you are cleared direct, be advised. CHKD helipad is hot, they're expecting you." "Kilo 27 copies direct." Ray keyed the intercom. 9 minutes, Doc." 9 minutes, Ethan said. And then he did the worst thing he had done all night, which was nothing at all for 9 minutes with nothing to fix and no one to work on and both hands empty. That's the thing nobody tells you about men like Ethan Carter. He could hold a stranger's life in his hands for 57 seconds and not move his pulse one beat. But sitting still with his daughter, 49 pounds, and 103, 2.8% an hour with nothing to do about it, was the single hardest thing he had ever done in his entire life. At 9:40, Ray said, "Talk to me." "About what?" "About anything. Talk or you're gonna go somewhere I can't reach you." Ethan looked out at the lights. "Her name's Lily," he said. "Yeah. She's 8.5. She corrects you on the half." "Sounds like a Carter." "She's got a note system." Ethan's voice was flat and even and terrible. "Every morning I write her a note, and I put it in her lunch. Started when Sarah died. She was 2, she couldn't read. I did it anyway. It's been 6 years, 2,000 notes maybe." "What do they say?" "Stupid stuff. Whatever's in my head at 4:40 in the morning." "Doc?" "She keeps them," Ethan said. "I didn't know that. I found out last year. She's got a shoebox." He laughed, and it was a terrible sound. "Ray, she's got a shoebox on the top shelf of her closet, same as mine, except mine's got a flag in it, and hers has got 2,000 pieces of napkin, And I want you to tell me which one of those is worth more, because I've been getting that answer wrong for 6 years. Ray Dunlap looked out his side of the aircraft and did not say anything for a while. Then he said, "You know what I did with mine?" "What?" "Mine's in the garage, under a tarp, behind the mower." Ray shrugged. "My wife asked me once why I didn't hang it up. I told her I'd get around to it." "Did you?" "Doc, that was 5 years ago." At 9:43, the intercom crackled, and the pilot said, "Master Chief CHKD's asking for a name for the log." Ray looked at Ethan, and Ethan Carter, who had spent 5 years making sure his name never went into a system anywhere, said, "Tell them, Ethan Carter." "Copy." "Tell them," Ethan said, "HM1, Ethan Carter." Ray Dunlap put his good hand over his mouth. At 9:47, they came down on the roof of Children's Hospital of the King's Daughters, and there was a team waiting, and Ethan Carter was out of that aircraft before the wheels had settled, and Ray Dunlap yelled something after him that he never heard. At 9:48, a resident in the elevator said, "Sir, you can't, I'm her father." "Sir, you can't be in here in that you're covered in, I'm her father." At 9:49, Ethan Carter came through the doors of the pediatric ED and saw 4 people around a bed and a very small shape in the middle of them, and Mrs. Delgado standing against a wall with her hands over her face. And the world went narrow and clean and silent, the way it always did, the way it always had, the way he had been trying for 5 years to make sure it never did again. "Report," he said. The charge nurse looked up. "Sir, are you?" "Ethan Carter. Her father." "What's hanging?" "Cephapime, sir. Went in at 9:44. Ethan Carter stopped walking. It's in. Cultures drawn peripheral and from the port, both before we hung it. Lactates pending. Blood pressure's 92/54 tachy at 160 she's mentating." "She's what?" "She's awake, sir." And a very small voice from inside all those people said, "Dad." At 9:50, Ethan Carter got to his daughter's bed, and there was no room, so he went to his knees at the head of it, and Lily Carter turned her head and looked at him with eyes that were too bright and too big, and said, "You're all wet." "Yeah, Bug." "Why are you wet?" "It's raining." "It's not raining." "Little bit." Lily's teeth were chattering so hard she could barely get it out. "I'm cold." "I know. I'm really, really cold, and they keep saying I'm hot and I'm not, Dad, I'm cold." "I know, baby, that's the riggers, that's your body doing a thing it's supposed to feel like that. Make it stop." And Ethan Carter, who had a Navy Cross in a shoebox and had put a chest tube in a Marine with a pen barrel and had brought a dead Master Chief back with his hand, said, "I can't." He said it out loud. In front of 4 nurses. "I can't make it stop, Lily. The medicine's in. It went in 6 minutes ago. And now we wait and I can't do anything. And that's the truth, and I'm not going to lie to you." Lily Carter looked at her father for a long second. Then she said, "Okay." Just that. "Okay." And she put her hand out from under the blanket, and Ethan took it, and it was burning, and it was so small, and he had held a man's carotid in that same hand 2 hours ago, and told an admiral to mark the time. "Dad?" "Yeah." "Did you get in trouble?" "What, at work? Mrs. D said you texted at 9, and you were coming home, and you never come home at 9. Her teeth chattered. "Did you get fired?" At 9:52, in a pediatric emergency department in Norfolk, Virginia, Ethan Carter said, "Yeah, Bug, I got fired." "Why?" "Because I helped somebody." Lily processed that. 8.5 years old, 1032, shaking like a leaf. "That's stupid," she said. "It is." "Are we okay?" And there it was, the only question. The one he'd been eating garbage for 14 months to keep her from ever asking. Ethan Carter opened his mouth to lie, and a voice behind him said, "Yes." He turned around. At 9:53, Admiral Catherine Voss was standing in the doorway of a pediatric ED bay in a formal gown with her shoes in her hand because she had run, and Ray Dunlap was behind her, and neither of them was supposed to be there. "Ma'am," Ethan said, "you can't be in here. I've been told." Voss did not move. Twice. "Ma'am?" "HM1, Voss said. Sit down and hold your daughter's hand, and let me be in a doorway." At 9:55, Dr. Amara Reyes came in, and she was in a sweatshirt and jeans, because she'd been at her kid's birthday party, and she took one look at the room and said, "Why is there an admiral in my ED?" "Long story," Ethan said. "Ethan." She was already at the monitor. "Talk to me. Cefepime in at 9:44. Cultures both sites before. B, P92 over 54. H, R160. She's alert and oriented. She's rigoring temp was 103, 2, at home. Axillary at 9:31, tympanic. Here at 9:41 was 103, 8. Dr. Reyes stopped and looked at him. "You know," she said, "in 4 years you have never once given me a bad report." Amara, "Sorry." She turned to Lily. "Hey, troublemaker." "Hi, Dr. Reyes." "I hear you're cold." "I'm so cold." "Yeah, that's gonna suck for about an hour, and then it's gonna get better." Reyes was reading the screen. "Ethan, her pressure's soft, but it's not scary. Lactate's back. It's 1.9. Ethan Carter put his forehead down on the mattress. 1.9. Reyes said again, because she knew exactly what she was doing. "That's not sepsis, Ethan. That's a neutropenic fever that got antibiotics in 46 minutes, which is the fastest door to needle I have seen in this building in 3 years. And I want to know how, because the ambulance didn't even get dispatched till 9:36. Nobody answered her. Reyes looked up. She looked at the admiral in the gown with her shoes in her hand. She looked at the master chief. She looked at Ethan Carter in a waiter's shirt with dried blood on the cuff. "Okay," she said. "I'm gonna go be a doctor and not ask." At 9:58, Lily Carter said, "Dad." "Yeah. Who are they?" And Ethan Carter turned around and looked at Ray Dunlap. 6 years. 6 years he'd counted 11 men in a photograph every single night. And number 4 from the left was standing in a doorway in Norfolk, Virginia, 60 pounds heavier and one wife happier. "Bug," Ethan said, and his voice went. "That's Ray." Lily's eyes moved. "Ray Dunlap." The whole room stopped. "Yes," Ethan said. And Lily Carter, 8.5 years old, 103.8 degrees, said, "You're the guy in the picture. You're 4th from the left." Ray Dunlap made a sound like he'd been hit. "Dad talks to you," Lily said. "Lily," Ethan said. "He does. At night. He goes in the closet, and he takes the box down, and he says all your names." She was shaking so hard the bed rail rattled. "Every night. He thinks I'm asleep. I'm not asleep." Ethan Carter could not breathe. 11 names, Lily said. "Every night. For my whole life." At 9:59, Master Chief Ray Dunlap, 58 years old, 30 years in, sat down on the floor of a pediatric emergency department with his back against the wall and cried into his hands like a child, and nobody in that room said one single word about it. At 10:04, they moved her upstairs and Ethan went with the bed, one hand on the rail the whole way, and Mrs. Delgado grabbed his sleeve in the hallway and said, "Mijo, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I should have called sooner. You did everything right." "She went from 99 to 102 in 40 minutes, Ethan. I turned around and—" "Mrs. D." Ethan stopped. He put both hands on her shoulders. "You did everything right. You had her at that door before I even knew. She's alive because of you." Mrs. Delgado looked at him. 78 years old. Hospital cafeteria. 90 cents over minimum. "That's my job," she said. "Yeah," Ethan said. "I know." At 10:22, Lily Carter was asleep on the 6th floor with fluids running and cefepime in and a temp coming down through 102. And Ethan Carter walked out into the hallway and found a Rear Admiral of the United States Navy sitting in a molded plastic chair in a gown barefoot with her shoes on her lap. He sat down 2 chairs away. "Ma'am." "Sit closer, Carter. I'm not going to bite you." He moved 1 chair. They sat there for a while. "Bob Hale's out of the ED," Voss said finally. "Bruised diaphragm, no fractures. They kept him for observation, and he's furious about it." "That's good." "He asked for your number. I told him you didn't have one that anybody had." She looked at her shoes. "That was the second worst sentence I've said tonight." "What was the first? Where did you learn that?" Ethan didn't answer. "Because I knew," Voss said. "Carter, I've been in the Navy 39 years. I watched you ask me to time you before you touched him. And I asked you where you learned it like I was asking a child in front of a room full of civilians, because part of me wanted to be the one who revealed you. And that's a hell of a thing to figure out about yourself at 61. Ma'am, you don't owe me anything. I know I don't." She turned and looked at him. "That's not why I'm sitting in a plastic chair with no shoes on." At 10:31, Voss said, "I need to tell you why they really sent the bird." Ethan looked at her. "I told you it was because your name lit a board," she said. "That's true. It's not complete." She put her shoes down on the floor. "The board that lit is a recall board." "Ma'am, there's a thing happening," Voss said. "Right now. Tonight. I can give you about 40% of it in a hospital hallway, and the rest in a room with no windows. There was an earthquake 11 days ago, and you probably saw 30 seconds about it on the news between a car commercial and the weather. 7.6. It's not a war, Carter. There's no enemy. There's a mountain valley with 14,000 people in it and 3 roads, and all 3 roads are gone. Ma'am, the Marines have a mission going in Tuesday. Rotary wing insert austere. No surgical, no evac for the first 72 hours. They've got 800 casualties they can't reach, and about 110 of them are kids and Carter. The thing about kids is that everybody's trained on a 180-pound man, and nobody's trained on a 19-kilo girl, and the drugs are all different, and the airways are all different, and the doses are all different, and if you get it wrong, you don't get a second try. Ethan Carter sat in a plastic chair in a hospital hallway on the 6th floor 40 feet from his sleeping daughter. "How many SARCs do you have?" he said. Voss said 311 worldwide. "How many are PEDS trained?" 19. "How many are available Tuesday?" Admiral Catherine Voss looked at the wall. 4, she said. "And one of them is a waiter in Norfolk." At 10:36, Ethan Carter said, "No." Carter: "Ma'am, I said no." "You haven't heard the offer. There isn't an offer that works." Ethan stood up. "Ma'am, do you understand what you're asking? My kid is 40 feet away with an ANC of 200. She got a fever tonight from nothing. From a doorknob. From the air. That's what her life is now, and it's going to be her life for 18 more months minimum. And every single time it happens, somebody has to be at that door in 46 minutes. I understand. With respect, ma'am, no you don't, because if you did, you wouldn't be in this hallway." Voss did not flinch. "Say the rest." "There is no rest." "Carter." Voss stood up too barefoot in a gown in a hospital hallway, and she was 10 inches shorter than him, and it didn't matter at all. "Say the rest. You're a bad liar and you've had a long night. Say it." And Ethan Carter said, "Because I want to go." It came out of him like something tearing. "That's the rest," he said. "That's the whole rest. You put 110 kids in a valley in front of me, and my hands woke up, ma'am. They woke up while you were still talking. I was already doing the math. 19 kilos, I was already doing the doses in my head while you were telling me about the roads." Carter: "That's what I am." His voice cracked straight down the middle. "That's what I've been hiding from for 5 years. It's not that they'd call, it's that I'd want to go. It's that some part of me has been waiting 5 years for the phone to ring, and I have hated that part of me every single day, and I have carried plates for 14 months to keep it in a box, and tonight a man choked at table 1. And I felt alive, ma'am. For 57 seconds I felt more alive than I've felt since my wife died. And then I went home and my daughter was dying and I couldn't do a thing. The hallway was very quiet. So no, Ethan said. The answer's no. Because the man who wants to go is not the man she needs. And I made her a promise in a hospital hallway that looked exactly like this one, and I'm not breaking it for a valley I can't pronounce. Voss said very quietly, "What was the promise?" "That I'd be there." "That's not a promise, Carter. That's a location." Ethan stopped. "Son, I've buried a husband," Voss said. 1998. And I stood in a hallway and made a promise too. And mine was that I'd never let the Navy have another thing from me. And I kept it for about 9 months, and then I put the uniform back on, and my daughter is 42 years old now, and we have dinner every Sunday, and she has never once, not one time, told me she wished I'd stayed home. Voss picked up her shoes. Because what she needed wasn't my location, Carter. It was my face. She needed to know what her mother's face looked like when her mother was all the way herself. And I'll tell you what I've learned in 28 years of Sunday dinners. Kids don't need you present. They need you true. And a father who spends 18 months in a room being a man, he isn't. So his daughter never has to see the man he is, hasn't given her a father at all. He's given her a very well-behaved stranger. At 10:41, Ethan Carter said, "Ma'am, I'd like you to leave now." And Admiral Catherine Voss said, "Yes, I would too." She got as far as the elevator. Then she turned around. "Tuesday," she said. 0400, Oceana. If you're not there, nobody calls you again ever, and I'll make sure of it personally. You have my word. The doors opened. And Carter, for what it's worth, if you don't come, I think you'll have made the right call, and I think you'll be miserable for 30 years, and I think both of those things are allowed to be true at the same time. The doors closed. At 10:44, Ray Dunlap came around the corner with 2 cups of coffee and one hand that could only carry one, so he'd put one down somewhere, and Ethan didn't ask. "She work you over?" "Yeah." "She's good at it?" "Yeah." Ray handed him the coffee. "Doc, I'm gonna say one thing, and then I'm gonna shut up and drive you home." "Ray." "One thing." Ray leaned against the wall. "You know why I keep my flag under a tarp behind the mower?" "No. Because if I hang it up, my grandkids ask about it." Ray shrugged. "And then I gotta tell them. And then they know their grandpa died on a hillside and some kid brought him back, and then they gotta live with that. And I decided that was too heavy for a 6-year-old. Ethan said nothing. "So I hid it," Ray said. "Behind the mower, real smart. Except last April my grandson found it. 6 years old. Dragged it out from under the tarp. And I about had a heart attack and I said, 'Buddy, put that back.'" "What did he say?" Ray Dunlap's face did something. He said, "Grandpa, why is it in the dark?" At 10:47, Ethan Carter walked back into room 612 and sat down in the recliner beside his daughter's bed, and Lily was asleep and her temp on the monitor said 101.6 and falling, and her hand was outside the blanket. He took it. And at 11:02, without opening her eyes, Lily Carter said, "Dad?" "I'm here, Bug. I heard you in the hallway." Ethan Carter's whole body went cold. "Go back to sleep." "You were yelling." "I wasn't yelling." "You were yelling at a lady." "Lily." "Dad?" She opened her eyes. 8.5. 101.6. "Are there really 110 kids?" At 11:02, Ethan Carter said, "Go to sleep, Lily." "Are there..." "Lily." "Dad, are there 110 kids?" And Ethan Carter, who had lied to an admiral at 9:22 and gotten away with it clean, looked at his 8.5-year-old daughter and discovered that she was the one person on this earth he had never once been able to do it to. Yes, he said. And they don't have a doctor. They have doctor's bug. They have doctors on ships and doctors on bases. What they don't have is somebody who can get to them. And you can get to them. Lily. Can you? Ethan looked at their hands. Hers was still too hot. The monitor said 101.4. Yeah, he said. I can get to them. Lily Carter thought about that for a long time, long enough that he hoped she'd fallen asleep. Then she said, Then why are we talking about it? At 11:05, Ethan Carter said, Because I'm not going. Why? Because you're sick. I'm always sick. Lily. Dad, I'm always sick. She turned her head on the pillow. I've been sick since I was 6. I'm going to be sick till I'm 10. Dr. Reyes literally has a chart on the wall and it goes to 2028. So if the rule is, you can't go till I'm not sick, then the rule is, you can't ever go, and you should just say that instead. Ethan Carter sat there with his mouth open. Where did you learn to argue like that? You, Lily said. That's not fair. Dad, you argue with everybody. You just do it real quiet so they don't notice. At 11:08, a nurse came in to swap a bag and looked at the two of them and looked at the clock and said, It's after 11, sweetheart. I know. You're supposed to be asleep. I'm having a conversation. The nurse looked at Ethan. Ethan shrugged. Okay, the nurse said, and left because there are some rooms you don't stay in. At 11:09, Lily said, What's a rigor? What? You said it. Downstairs. You said that's the rigors. It's when your body shakes to make a fever go higher. It's your body trying to cook the germ. So the shaking's the good part. The shaking's the good part. Lily filed that away somewhere. She did that. She had done it since she was 4. Dad, she said, what's a corpsman? Ethan Carter's chest closed up. Where'd you hear that word? The old guy. Ray, in the hallway. He said that's my corpsman to a nurse. Lily's eyes were bright and too big. He said it like it was a thing, like a big thing. It's a Navy medic bug. No, it's not. Lily, Dad, you're doing the thing where you make it small. She pulled her hand away from him, which she had never done in her life, and it went through him like a nail. You always make it small. Everything's small. Your job's just a job, and the box in the closet is just a box. And I'm not supposed to ask about Mom because it makes you go quiet, and now there's a helicopter and an admiral, and a guy who says you brought him back from being dead, and you're still sitting there telling me it's small. Ethan Carter could not speak. I'm 8.5, Lily said. I'm not stupid. I know what I've got. I know my numbers. I know what neutropenic means, and I know what my ANC was on Thursday. It was 200. I heard you, and I know that when it's under 500, that's the dangerous part. Her voice went up and cracked. I know all of it, Dad. You never told me any of it. I just listened. At 11:12, Ethan Carter put his face in his hands. Everybody in the whole world knows more about you than me, Lily said, and I'm the one who lives with you. At 11:14, he lifted his head. Okay, he said. Okay, what? Okay, ask me. Lily Carter went very still. Anything. Anything. You'll lie. I won't lie. You'll do the small thing. Lily, Ethan said, I will not do the small thing. Ask me. At 11:15 in room 612 on the 6th floor of a children's hospital in Norfolk, Virginia, an 8.5-year-old girl with an IV in her chest and a temperature of 101.4 said, What's in the box? And Ethan Carter told her. He told her all of it. Not the sanded down version, not the version for civilians. He told her there were 11 men in the picture, and he said all 11 names out loud in a hospital room. And when he got to number 4, he stopped and Lily said, That's Ray. And he said, That's Ray, and kept going. He told her about a hillside and a headlamp with a red filter on it. He told her about a pen barrel. He told her that he had given his own blood out of his own arm into a boy named Danny Ruiz, who was 22 years old and who was now 30 and had 2 kids and a landscaping company in Tucson, and who sent Ethan a text every year on the same date that just said, Still here, and that Ethan had never once answered it. Why don't you answer it? Because if I answer it, it's real. He told her about the flag. He told her they'd given him the wrong one. And then he told her about the medal, and Lily said, "Can I see it?" And Ethan said, "It's at home." And Lily said, "Dad, can I see it?" And Ethan Carter said, "Yeah, when we go home, yeah." At 11:31, Lily said, "Was Mom proud of you?" And that one nearly killed him. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, Bug. She was." Then why is it in the dark? Ethan Carter went absolutely rigid. "What did you say?" "Why is it in the closet?" Lily said. "In the dark, under the coats." At 11:32, a 35-year-old man sat in a plastic recliner and understood that a 6-year-old boy in Virginia Beach and an 8-year-old girl in Norfolk had, without ever meeting, asked the exact same question in the exact same words, and that maybe that's not a coincidence. Maybe that's just what children do. Maybe children are the only people left who ask the obvious thing out loud. "Because it's heavy," Ethan said. So I didn't want you carrying it." Lily Carter said, "Dad, I already carry it. I've carried it my whole life. I just didn't know what it was." At 11:40, she fell asleep mid-sentence, the way kids do, and Ethan Carter sat there with his hand on the rail and did not move for 2 hours. At 1:20 in the morning, Dr. Amara Reyes came in with a chart and found him awake. "Cultures are cooking. Nothing yet. That's good. That's what we want at 4 hours." "Yeah." "Ethan." "Yeah." Her ANC came back. Reyes sat down on the rolling stool. "It's 410. Ethan Carter's head came up. "It doubled," he said. "It doubled. It's still neutropenic. She still admitted we're still on antibiotics for at least 48, but Ethan 410 means her marrow's answering the phone." Reyes looked at him over her glasses. "She's coming out of it." At 1:22, Ethan Carter put his head back against the chair and did not cry, because his body had used it all up hours ago and just breathed instead, which was somehow worse to watch. "Now," Reyes said, "you want to tell me about the helicopter?" "No." "Ethan?" "Amara, I've had a night." "Ethan, I've been your kid's oncologist for 4 years. I have watched you take a bus here at 7 in the morning. I have watched you eat vending machine crackers for dinner on infusion days because you gave her the sandwich. I have watched you flush a port better than my own fellows." She leaned forward. "And tonight, the United States Navy landed on my roof. So yes, I've had a night too, and I want to tell you something, as her doctor, and you're going to let me." Ethan looked at her. "Her prior auth got denied Thursday," Reyes said. "How do you know that?" "Because I got the same letter you did, and I've been on the phone about it since 8 this morning, which is a thing I don't tell my patients I do." She pulled a folded page out of the chart. "Ethan, you have no VA claim on file." "No." "You're a service-connected veteran with a documented medical board and you've never filed." "Amara, do you know what CHAMPVA is?" Ethan said nothing. "Do you know what a service-connected disability rating over 50% does to a dependent's coverage in this country?" Reyes's voice was shaking now. "Ethan, do you understand that for 4 years there has been a door with your name carved into it, and you have been standing next to it eating crackers?" At 1:25, Ethan Carter said, "A claim is an address." Reyes stopped. "What?" "If I file, I exist. If I exist, they can find me. If they find me, they call. And if they call—" He stopped. "You go," Reyes said. "I go." Dr. Amara Reyes sat back on that stool and looked at the man in front of her for a long, long time. "Ethan," she said, "you let your daughter's coverage lapse, so a phone wouldn't ring." He didn't answer. "You understand that's the worst thing I've ever heard in this building," she said, "and I work in pediatric oncology." At 1:31 she left, and Ethan Carter sat in the dark with a number in his head that had 11 digits worth of gravity and had just in the space of 6 minutes turned into a completely different number. At 8:15 Sunday morning, A nurse knocked on the door of 612 and said, "Mr. Carter? There's a woman at the desk." "Mrs. Delgado?" "No, sir. She says her name's Vanessa Kane." At 8:16, Ethan Carter walked out into the hallway and found the CEO of Kane Hospitality Group standing there in jeans and a sweatshirt, with her hair pulled back and no makeup on, and a plastic bag in her hand, and she looked about 19 years old and about 109. "How did you find this floor?" Ethan said. "I called the hospital 14 times. "They can't give you that." "They didn't," Vanessa said. "The old woman did, Mrs. Delgado. She was in the lobby at 6 in the morning with a thermos." Her voice failed on the word thermos. "She's been down there since 6 in the morning in the lobby because they wouldn't let her up and she wouldn't go home. And I asked her why, and she said, and I quote, because somebody has to be in the building." Ethan said nothing. "Somebody has to be in the building," Vanessa repeated. "That's a whole philosophy, isn't it? That's an entire way to live, and she said it to me in a lobby like it was the weather." At 8:18, Vanessa Kane held out the plastic bag. "What is that?" "It's your apron." Ethan didn't take it. "And your name tag," Vanessa said. "I got it out of the glass. I got it out of the glass at 11 o'clock last night with a fork, because my hands were shaking too much to use my fingers, and then I sat in my empty restaurant until 4 in the morning holding a wet piece of plastic with your name on it." "Ms. Kane, I'm not finished. I'm sorry I'm not finished." She was crying, and she was not doing anything about it, which was new. "I need to say something, and it's not an apology because I've been thinking about it for 9 hours, and I've figured out that an apology is a thing you do to get something back, and I'm not getting anything back, so." Ethan waited. "I froze," Vanessa said. At 8:19, the hallway was very quiet. "That's what happened," she said. "That's the whole thing. A man stopped breathing 9 feet from me, and I stood in a doorway with my hand over my mouth for 57 seconds, and I did nothing. Not one step. And then you fixed it, and then I turned around, and there were 38 people in that room who had watched me not move." Her jaw was going. "And I couldn't survive that. So I made it about you. Because if you were nobody, then it didn't matter that nobody had moved. If you were nobody, then there was nobody to compare me to." "Ms. Kane, I built a whole company on a sentence," Vanessa said. "The sentence is, people are where they are because of what they are. I've said it in 3 magazine profiles. I've said it to my staff. I said it to my father the last time I spoke to him 11 years ago, when he was managing a Denny's in Roanoke at 55 years old, and I told him it was because of what he was." She wiped her face with the heel of her hand. "I said that to my dad. And then last night I said it to you. Same sentence. Same words almost. And a helicopter landed on it." At 8:21, Ethan Carter said, "Ms. Kane, is my check going to direct deposit, or are you mailing it?" Vanessa Kane laughed, and it came out broken. "You did it again. I need to know. You did it again. That's exactly what you said last night, and I've been thinking about that for 9 hours too. And Mr. Carter, I need you to understand that that sentence has done more damage to me than anything anyone has ever said to my face in my entire life." "That wasn't my intent." "I know," Vanessa said. "That's why it worked." At 8:23, she took an envelope out of her coat. "It's direct deposit," she said. "It went out at 4 this morning. It's $11,400. Ethan Carter stopped. "That's not my check. It's 14 months of the promotions you didn't get," Vanessa said. "I pulled your file at 2 a.m. You were up for lead server in month 4. Marcus killed it. He killed it again in month 7 and month 11. He wrote, and I have it in front of me, not a culture fit." Ethan said nothing. "Then I read what he wrote in month 11, Vanessa said. "And it says carries himself like he thinks he's better than the job." She looked up. "And Mr. Carter, the thing that has kept me awake since 2 in the morning is that he was right. You were better than the job. Every single day for 14 months, you were the most qualified human being in that building by a margin that I cannot even compute. And my floor manager felt it, and he couldn't name it, so he punished you for it. 3 times. and I signed off on all 3 in about 4 seconds each, because a 14-month server isn't worth 4 seconds. At 8:25, Vanessa Kane said, "Marcus doesn't work for me anymore." "That's not what I want." "I know it isn't. That's not why I did it." She put the envelope on the windowsill because he wouldn't take it. "I did it because on Thursday I have to sit down with Arcadine and the Navy and explain why they should ever eat in one of my rooms again. And the honest answer is that they shouldn't. And I'm going to say that out loud. And if I'm going to say that out loud with Marcus still on my payroll, then I'm just doing PR. Ms. Kane. Vanessa. Ms. Kane, Ethan said. "I don't forgive you." At 8:26, the hallway stopped. "Okay," Vanessa said. "I want to be clear about that because I think you came here for it, and I'm not going to hand it to you at 8 in the morning outside my daughter's room, because you had a bad night." Ethan's voice was completely level. "You didn't do it to a hero. You didn't do it to a Navy Cross. You did it to a waiter. And the only reason you're standing here is that the waiter turned out to be something else, and Ms. Kane, that's the exact same math you were doing when you ripped my name off my chest. It's the same equation. You just plugged in a different number." Vanessa Kane stood there and took it. "So, no," Ethan said. "I don't forgive you, not today." "Okay, but I'll tell you what I'll do." He picked up the envelope. "I'll take this, because my rent's on the 9th, and my kid's got an appeal window, and I'm not too proud to take money out of the hand of somebody who owes it to me. That's not forgiveness, that's a paycheck." "Understood. And Ms. Kane." Ethan stopped at the door of 612. "There's a 19-year-old kid named Danny working your floor. He's got a baby at home. He was the only person in that building who ever asked me a real question." Vanessa said, "The shoes." "The shoes," Ethan said. "You spent $4 of his money in one sentence, and you never thought about it again." At 8:28, Vanessa Kane said, "I'll fix it." "Don't fix it," Ethan said. "Just ask him his name." At 10:04, Sunday Master Chief Ray Dunlap came up to the 6th floor with a plastic bag of his own, and in it was a stuffed dolphin from the gift shop that cost $26, and he was extremely defensive about it. "They didn't have anything good." "Ray, she's 8. They had a bear, but it looked drunk." Lily Carter, sitting up 100.1, said, "It's a dolphin." "That's right." "Why a dolphin?" Ray sat down heavy in the chair. "Because dolphins are what your dad's got on his uniform, sweetheart. Little gold ones. They mean he can jump out of an airplane and swim to shore and then fix you." Lily looked at her father. "Is that true?" "That's Ray's version." "It's the accurate version," Ray said. At 10:12, Lily said, "Ray." "Yes, ma'am." "When my dad brought you back." "Lily," Ethan said. "Let her ask," Ray said. "When my dad brought you back," Lily said. "What did you say?" "When you woke up, what's the first thing you said?" At 10:13, Master Chief Ray Dunlap looked at the ceiling for about 6 seconds. "I said, I'm cold," he said. The room went silent. Lily Carter's face changed. "That's what I said," she whispered. "Last night. That's what I said." "Yeah," Ray said. "That's what everybody says, sweetheart. Every single one of them. That's the first thing." He looked at Ethan. "And you know what he told me? Same thing he told you." He said, "I know." At 10:14, Lily Carter said, "He said, I can't." Ray blinked. "What?" "He said I can't make it stop." Lily looked at her dad. "He told me the truth. He said the medicine's in, and now we wait, and I can't do anything, and I'm not going to lie to you." And Ray Dunlap turned and looked at Ethan Carter with an expression that nobody in that room could read. "Doc," he said, "you told an 8-year-old you couldn't fix it." "Yeah." "In 6 years, I never heard you say that once. Not one time. Not on the worst night of my life. You looked at a man with his leg off, and you said, I got you. That was different." "Why?" At 10:16, Ethan Carter said, "Because she's going to be here in the morning, and the morning after that, and in 20 years. He was looking at Lily. You can tell a stranger anything, Ray. You've got 9 minutes with him. You've got forever with your kid. And forever doesn't work if you lie. At 11:40 Sunday, Lily Carter said, "Dad, it's Sunday." "I know. Tuesday's in 2 days." At 11:41, Ethan Carter said, "Lily, I'm not going." "I know," she said. "I want to tell you why you're not going, because I don't think you know." Ethan looked at her. "You think you're not going because I'm sick?" Lily said. "You're not. You're not going because you're scared that if you go and you like it, then that means you love it more than me. And you don't want to find that out." At 11:42, the room was completely silent. "Where?" Ethan said, and had to start over. "Where did you get that?" "I've been watching you my whole life," Lily said. "You're the only thing I've got to watch." At 11:44, Ethan Carter said, "That's not it." "Dad, Lily, I'm not scared. I'd like it. I know I'd like it. That's not the scary part." He leaned forward and took both her hands. "The scary part is Thursday. The scary part is that you get a fever on Thursday at 1:02, and you look around the room and there's nobody there, and you're 8 years old and you're cold and you're shaking, and the door opens and it's not me." Lily Carter said, "Dad, last night the door opened and it wasn't you." At 11:45, Ethan Carter went white. "It was Mrs. D," Lily said. "For 40 minutes it was Mrs. D. She carried me down the stairs. She did. 78 years old. She carried me down 2 flights, and she got a neighbor to drive us, and she said your name to the desk, and she said the word. The one you told the busser to text her. She said neutropenic to the nurse, and I heard her say it, and she got it right, Dad." Ethan couldn't breathe. "You weren't there," Lily said. "You've never been there on the bad nights. You're always at work. You've been at work my whole life, Dad, because that's what buys the medicine, and I've never once been alone, not one single time, because you built a whole thing around me. You built Mrs. D and Dr. Reyes, and the magnet on the fridge, and the notes in my lunch." At 11:47, she said the sentence that ended it. "You already left," Lily Carter said. "You left 5 years ago. You just did it 11 blocks away instead of 11,000 miles, and you called it staying." At 11:48, Ethan Carter put his head down on his daughter's hospital bed and broke completely. At 11:52, Lily said quietly, "How long is Tuesday?" He couldn't answer. "Dad, how long?" 30 days, he said into the blanket. "Then I'm home." "Then go for 30 days. Bug, go for 30 days and come back and hang the flag up." Lily Carter put her hand on the back of her father's head, the way he had done to her 10,000 times, the way you learn it without anybody teaching you. "And put my box next to it, on the same shelf, where I can see them both." At 11:53, Ethan Carter said, "Why?" And Lily said, "Because I want people to know what my dad is, and I'm tired of being the only one who does." At 3:44, Monday afternoon, Ethan Carter filed a claim. It took 9 minutes on a laptop that Dr. Reyes brought up to room 612 herself and set on his lap and did not leave the room until he'd hit submit. The rating came back in 11 weeks at 70%. CHAMPA covered Lily Carter, effective the date of the claim. The appeal on the maintenance therapy became irrelevant by the end of the year because there was nothing left to appeal. 5 years of crackers. 9 minutes. At 3:51 Monday, Ethan Carter said out loud to nobody, "I could have done this in 2021. And Amara Reyes said, "Yes, and you didn't. And now you did. Pick which one of those you're going to live in, Ethan, because you only get one." At 4:20 Tuesday morning, Ethan Carter stood on a flight line at Oceana in a uniform that still fit, which he had not expected, and which he did not enjoy finding out. Admiral Catherine Voss said, "HM1. "Ma'am, you're 4 minutes late." "Yes, ma'am." 30 days, Voss said, "not 31. And Carter, understand me. If your daughter spikes, we pull you out of that valley if I have to fly the aircraft myself. That's not a courtesy. That's an order I'm putting in writing, and if you argue with it, I'll have you removed from the manifest." Ethan Carter said, "Ma'am, I wasn't going to argue." Voss looked at him. "No," she said. "I don't suppose you were." At 4:31, Ray Dunlap said, "Doc, one more thing." "Ray, I'm about to get on a one thing." Ray held out his phone. "Danny Ruiz, Tucson. I called him Sunday." Ethan Carter stopped walking. "He's been sending you a text every year for 6 years, Ray said. "Same date, 2 words. And you never answered, not one time, and he told me Sunday night on the phone that he figured you were dead, and that he sent it anyway because sending it was the only thing he had." Ray put the phone in Ethan's hand. "Answer him," Ray said. "It'll take you 4 seconds. You've got a helicopter waiting, Doc, and this'll take you 4 seconds, and you've been not doing it for 6 years. At 4:32, Ethan Carter typed 2 words and sent them. "Still here." And in Tucson, Arizona, at 1:32 in the morning, a 30-year-old man with a landscaping company and 2 kids sat straight up in bed and woke his wife and could not explain to her for about 20 minutes why he was crying. At 4:36, Ethan Carter got on the aircraft. 30 days later, he came home, and he was 11 pounds lighter, and he did not talk about it for a long time, and eventually he did in pieces at the kitchen table at 4:40 in the morning to an 8-year-old girl who was 9 by then, and who corrected people on it. He'd worked on 141 people. 94 of them were children. He got 133 of them out. 8 he didn't. He said all 8 names out loud once at that kitchen table, and Lily Carter wrote them down on a piece of paper without asking permission and put it in her box. The story got out in November, because of course it did, because there had been 38 people in that room, and one of them was Preston from Arcadine, who could not stop talking about a halfway mark on a wine glass, and who told it at a defense conference in front of 400 people and cried doing it. It ran everywhere for about 11 days. Ethan Carter gave exactly 1 interview, and it was 4 minutes long, and the reporter asked him what he wanted people to take away from it, and Ethan Carter said, "Ask the guy his name." And that was the whole answer, and the reporter waited for more, and there wasn't any more. Vanessa Kane never got the contract. Arcadine pulled out, and the Navy went with a firm in Virginia Beach, and Kane Hospitality lost 2 of 11 restaurants in the following year. She testified about none of it. She gave no interviews. She turned down a book. What she did do in March was walk into a pediatric oncology waiting room at CHKD with no press and no photographer, and a check for the amount of the $11 million contract she hadn't gotten, which she did not have, and which took her 4 years and 2 restaurants to pay off, and she paid every dollar of it, and she never once told anyone. And the only reason it's known at all is that Amara Reyes said it out loud at a fundraiser in 2029, while Vanessa Kane sat in the back row and stared at the floor. Danny the busser is a general manager now. He has 3 kids. $19 an hour became a salary. Vanessa Kane learned his last name on a Sunday in March and used it every single day for 11 years. Mrs. Delgado died in 2031 at 79, and Ethan Carter carried her casket, and so did Ray Dunlap, and so did a rear admiral in dress blues who had retired 2 years earlier, and who flew in from Charleston because a woman she had met once in a lobby had said a sentence to her that she had never gotten over. Somebody has to be in the building. Lily Carter went into remission in 2028. She stayed there. She's 22 now, and she's in her 2nd year of nursing school at Old Dominion, and she is going into pediatric oncology, and when people ask her why, she says her dad taught her. They ask what he taught her. And Lily Carter says, "He taught me that when you can't fix it, you say so, and then you stay anyway." On the wall of a 2-bedroom in Berkeley, Virginia, there is a flag in a case. Next to it on the same shelf at the same height, in a place where the light hits both, there is a shoebox with 2,000 notes in it, written on torn scraps of napkin at 4:40 in the morning by a man who was tired. Neither one is in the dark. And the last thing, the thing Ethan Carter thinks about on the days when he thinks about it, is not the helicopter. It isn't the admiral, or the medal, or 133 people in a valley. It's 57 seconds on a marble floor, when he was nobody, when nobody was watching.